Over the last 2 days, we have received numerous emails asking how we know an equatorial coronal hole is coming into view this weekend. This video will not only explain this forecast, but will be applicable whenever you are watching it in the future, based on what the sun is doing. Let's begin with the basics by learning what a coronal hole actually is with episode 8 of our 2014 Sun series. I'll see you again in a few minutes. We mentioned coronal holes in a previous episode. To begin learning about coronal holes, let's build on what we've learned. We have seen the sunspots, dark umbras surrounded by penumbras, with magnetic fields connecting the spots right through the centers. The arches carry plasma and charged particles, and therefore logically connect at oppositely magnetized sunspots, a positive and a negative. These magnetic arches, despite how high into the corona they can extend, are some of the lowest magnetic fields above the photosphere of the sun. The connection arches between sunspot umbras are known as umbral fields, while larger arching fields extend across a very large area of the sun, and these are called coronal fields in blue. Just like the umbral fields, these can push and maintain charged particles. Where there are no fields arching over the surface, we find the coronal holes. These are areas where the forces controlling the charged particles extend out into space rather than arch back down to the sun. This allows the solar wind to push out much more quickly. The solar wind streams from coronal holes can be twice as fast as normal solar wind or more, as fast as many large CMEs. Coming out of the centers of coronal holes are alpha waves, which NASA believes transfers extra energy to the Earth compared to the surrounding areas. Using NOAA's endless spirals, we see solar wind speed on the left and density on the right. There are no CMEs to be seen, but yet some streams are much faster than others. Those are the coronal hole streams, and if you look to the right, there are denser lines ahead of those faster streams. The faster coronal hole stream catches up to slower solar wind out ahead of it and bunches up the particles just like snow bunched up on a shovel. Coronal hole streams are distinct on the asolar wind charts. We have a density rise, here going from the low to mid single digits in proton density per cubic centimeter, up to spikes nearing 20 protons or more. This is the dense bunching ahead of the faster stream where it meets the slower particles. Now after that wave passes, the faster particle stream comes and the speed rises quickly. You can verify this by noting the higher temperature of the plasma particles emitted by coronal hole streams. The density waves and speedy stream behind them make geomagnetic storms just like CMEs do, space weather. It's the same basic idea of intensified solar wind. Coronal holes are just that, areas of low density in the corona, the solar atmosphere, but not the sun itself. Coronal holes come in all shapes and sizes. Some look downright ridiculous, like the famous Big Bird or Chicken Man coronal hole. The scientists discover the intricate connections between space weather and the Earth system. Coronal holes will play a vital role in the process. Welcome back. When we're up to 2017, if it looks to you like the top two lines have a lagged relationship 1 to 3 years behind the bottom two lines, you are correct. The bottom lines are the coronal holes and the top lines are the number of tropical cyclones. This is indeed from Ferris Wald's national championship winning study. Apparently those judges thought the coronal holes were important to cyclones too. So, now let's come to how we know a coronal hole is coming now. This is the incoming limb of the sun in 211 angstroms, and we need our eyes aimed at the equatorial zone where a black area is carved out of the corona. Let's now see what is hiding out of our view from Earth using the stereo spacecraft. Simply 360 sphere here. Let's rotate to the 90 position and see the eastern limb head on. There is indeed an equatorial coronal hole there waiting to face Earth towards the end of next week. This can also be accomplished with a flattened heliographic image where Earth view is centered and the stereocraft show the other side. Remember, stereo B is dead, which is why there is missing coverage of the far side over on the right. Some other notes are that it is of negative polarity per the red on the NSO gong magnetic readings. We can also forecast that it will not be of the severe nature of coronal holes, otherwise the carved out region would dip down further towards the photosphere. So it is likely to be moderate to maybe slightly above average in strength. It is about 6 days from 90 degrees to facing Earth, then it will be another 3 days until that solar wind arrives. I hope you learned a bit about coronal holes here, and now remember that all interplanetary magnetic connections of the planets hit these coronal holes, but that's a topic for another day. Be safe, everyone.